Partner ready?
Mm-hmm.
Opponents ready?
Yeah.
Judge ready? My time starts now. With conflicts rising in countries all around the world, it is hard to think that the only way to solve them is through more conflict, and it is even harder to say that is the most effective way to stopping these. My partner and I are here to tell you why these conflicts should be met with peace and not by war, and why we affirm the resolution that, on balance, diplomacy has better maintained peace than military power, for these reasons. Our first contention is that diplomacy is more effective than war because it saves lives and money. To state the obvious, war kills. And not only do soldiers die violent deaths, but civilians do as well. In World War II, over 30 million civilians perished due to the war. And in the Vietnam War, 3 million people lost their lives due to the fighting. This has devastated the country, especially since that war was never even resolved. The Vietnam War cost the U.S. $3 trillion adjusted to inflation, proving the point that war is extremely expensive. This is a prime example of how war cripples countries' economies and their society for long periods of time. Because of these reasons, wars have severely negative impacts on the general population. Where war devastates regions, countries, and land masses, diplomacy resolves the underlying issues as well as saves lives and money. This leads into our next contention, that foreign aid secures peace and helps our economy. Foreign aid can come in many different forms, such as developmental assistance, disbursements, humanitarian assistance, bilateral and multilateral aid, all of which restore the economy and the well-being of the people. For example, the U.S. has spent $35 billion in foreign aid for South Korea after the Korean War, a war that left South Korea without a stable government or economy. Since then, foreign aid has brought the country to a point where there is a stable democratic government and economy. The U.S. has even made a new trade partner with them, and they are now the United States' 10th largest export market, making back the $35 billion annually in exports. This is just one example of the many times that foreign aid has helped countries. Foreign aid helps countries to have functioning economy and governments. It also grants governments the ability to establish themselves and stop insurgencies. Another way that foreign aid helps their people is that it can force countries to put in place human rights and fair democratic rule, either by withholding or granting extra aid based on actions. And it does not only help the recipient of the aid, it also adds to the economy of the entire world. Finally, our last contention is that diplomacy is more effective than war because it brings peace and long-lasting peace. With the main causes of conflict being inequalities among groups, poor economic opportunities, and deficient societies, it is hard not to see why military confrontation is counterproductive towards stopping these conflicts from arising. For one, we have already proved that war costs extreme amounts of money, which cripples the economy, and that it also cripples the society because of the loss of lives. Both of these facts prove that wars lead to even more conflicts. Diplomacy does not have those consequences. In fact, it solves these issues and thus sets up the posterity with society where these problems are no longer there, or at least significantly smaller. Diplomacy has the ability to do this because it can solve the problems directly and sets up sets up long-lasting alliances, rather than military force, which almost always results in the state in ruins and an outside force trying to replace it, causing more war. All of these reasons show why diplomacy provides long-lasting solutions to issues that would only be amplified by war. It is because economies, governments, and the lives of people everywhere are dependent on the answer of this resolution that we urge you to vote on the side of peace talks rather than brutality and violence. We urge you to vote pro on the ballot. Thank you.
Okay, so do you think that military force always leads to war?
I think that in most cases it does.
Okay, what about the chance of diplomacy failing?
Well, the chance of diplomacy failing is much less significant in the sense that when it does fail, which of course everything does at some point, it does not have the repercussions that military force does when it fails, which could result in countless more lives being lost.
Aren't most wars preceded by a lot of broken treaties that do not last?
Well, it can, or it can result in long-lasting alliances. It's dependent on the diplomacy that's put in place.
Okay, so for your contention 3, other than the military being counterproductive, what exactly was it about?
Oh, it was about that diplomacy solves the issues that cause conflicts, rather than military force actually causes those conflicts, which leads to more wars.
Okay. Do you think there are any ways that diplomacy can not save lives?
Well, I think that when diplomacy is successful, it saves lives without any fighting, and when it fails, it can be tried again to save lives again, and there might be a few lives lost, or in the period between renegotiating the diplomacy, but I think that it's much less than failed military action.
What about if a sanction is imposed and it causes inflation rates to shoot up? Is that technically and if it brings the country to negotiations, technically it's a success, but.
Opponents ready?
Yeah.
Partner ready? Okay. Judge ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay. There is a big problem going on in the world right now, and that is that the countries of our world don't know which type of power to use, soft power or hard power. Hi, my name is David Liu, and I am representing the con side of this debate. My side states that using hard power, or a combination of both soft and hard power, is better than only using soft power. Using hard power is using militaristic forces against countries that are misbehaving or breaking laws. And soft power is using unforceful ways, like ways impacting economy, against countries that are misbehaving. The right way to go when it comes to this topic is to use only hard power or a mix of both soft and hard power. An example of the U.S. using hard power is when they fought in the Iraq War in 2003. The Iraqi military was using missiles and chemical weapons to attack oil tankers near the Persian Gulf. So the U.S. fought back using their military power to end this type of behavior from the Iraqi government. My first contention is that using only soft power can be very ineffective and slow. When only using soft power, other countries still might not cooperate with you, so you need to use some sort of hard power to make them have no choice but to cooperate with you. Only using soft power also doesn't even give the misbehaving country a reason to stop misbehaving. When only using soft power and a sanction is placed on a country, the bad country could just pretend like they have changed and wait for the sanction to be taken off of them. After the sanction is taken off, they could just continue their bad behaviors and could even execute a plan that could end up killing hundreds or even thousands of innocent people. My second contention is that deterrence is a very good form of hard power to use against other countries. Deterrence is the act of discouraging another action through installing doubt or fear. The government of a country could show the countries who are performing bad actions their military and all of their power so that the disobeying countries would be afraid of them and the consequences of their actions. Deterrence is also a way to use hard power non-violently, because deterrence is showing other countries your power and military and not necessarily using it. This can help to eliminate bad behaviors while not harming innocent people. In conclusion, using hard power or a mixture of both soft and hard power is more effective and faster than only using soft power. Thank you for listening to our speech, Judge, and please vote con.
Time starts now. You said that you need hard power to have soft power, correct?
No, I did not say that.
Well, you said that. What do you mean by? What did you say then about soft power in your first contention?
In my first contention, I said that soft power is. Can be very ineffective and slow compared to hard power.
Do you have any evidence to support this?
Well, Yes, an example is the Iraq War, as I brought up before. Because the U.S. used their hard power, it stopped the Iraqi government from continuing these bomb testings and chemical weapons testings and
But-
helping to eliminate.
Excuse, do you have any evidence of soft power taking a long time and being ineffective?
Well, soft power. So, soft power takes a long time in general. If you think about it, it has to pass through all courts and decisions made by a group called
Do you
the
have
UN.
a specific example?
No, I don't have that right now.
You said about deterrence. You said that it doesn't end up harming anyone, correct? Or it's a non-violent solution.
Well, it can be. Not always, though.
Okay. Don't you agree that it would, instead of, it would result in a stalemate? Or an arms race, for example?
Okay, an arms race would actually benefit the area because when an arms race occurs, both countries are trying to get the higher arms and the most powerful weapons. So they know how each other are progressing and they know that both sides are strong. So the opponents know if they attack their opponent, then the opponent will attack them back. So they know that like both sides will be devastated if one of them
Couldn't that
is-
result in higher tensions?
Can I have 45 seconds of prep?
Starting now. It's 45 seconds.
In my opponent's first contention, they said that war kills people and kills all sorts of different people, and it's expensive. However, military power does not always lead to war, and diplomacy does not always save lives because people obviously want to stop wars, and usually people do that through diplomacy, and so that must mean that most wars happen after treaties have been broken and diplomacy fails. And in their second contention, they said foreign aid can help a country establish their place in the world. However, one example where that did not happen is Taiwan. There was an article saying that Taiwan would give large sums of money to certain countries to try and get them to be noticed instead of China. However, that did not work as well as their current method, which is not giving large sums of money to other countries, and it did not establish strong allies as they hoped it would. In their third contention, they said that it brings peace and long-lasting peace. However, I already said that many wars happen after broken treaties, and many people break treaties because they're not satisfied with their end of the compromise, and and that's probably unsatisfaction with a person's end of of a compromise is not that rare of a thing. They also said that war cripples the economy. However, if you insert a sanction on a different country, it cripples that country's economy, which can lead to death from like too high living costs, or at least increased poverty rate or suffering, and increased living costs and skyrocketing inflation. So diplomacy isn't always the nicest option either. And because of these reasons, I hope that you realize that you vote our ballot.
All right. My cross-ex will start now. So you said that military power does not equal war. Am I correct?
Yeah, not necessarily.
Well, wouldn't you say that, let's say, America's intervention with Saddam Hussein? Wouldn't you say that that's an example of military power?
Yeah.
And you are aware of how badly that backfired. Am I correct? It ended in civil war for Iraq.
Yeah, and I never said that it never leads to war.
I know, but still, do you agree that military power can lead to war?
Yes.
All right. And you said that most wars are caused by broken treaties. Am I correct?
No, I said usually wars follow broken treaties.
I know exactly. That's exactly what I said. Wars
Yeah.
caused by broken treaties. So, can you name one broken treaty? Can you name one broken treaty?
Usually the ones that came before the American Revolution and civil wars and stuff like that.
Well, do you know where those treaties came from?
From diplomacy.
Not exactly. Like, for example, the Treaty of Versailles, it came from after the end of World War I, and it was as a punishment to the It was as a punishment to those Germans, and it resulted from the bitterness and the hate that the Allied powers gained from the war with Germany in World War I. So that treaty was actually a result of World War I. So wouldn't you say that many of these treaties could result from wars previously?
Yeah, because most wars end with a treaty.
And then you also say that sanctions cripple economies. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Are you aware that sanctions are actually a form of hard power?
No.
Because according to Jan Philipp and E. Wagner, hard power is all the versions of hard power are military intervention, economic sanctions, and coercive diplomacy. So, if this is a form of hard power, isn't this an example of hard power crippling economies?
32 seconds to use.
All right, my attack speech will start now. So, in my opponent's first contention, they said that hard power is a way to force other countries to action, to make a decision. But using this hard power to bully these countries into submission and make a decision, it creates bitterness, and that bitterness can grow into utter hate, and that utter hate can grow into more conflict through terrorism, for example, because U.S. was imposing themselves on Afghanistan. Al Qaeda was formed, and Al Qaeda did all kinds of terrorism on the U.S. and even in Afghanistan. They also said that if an economic sanction is placed on a country, they can pretend to change. But when has this ever happened? When has a country ever pretended to change so that an economic sanction could happen, so that an economic sanction can be removed? This is extremely hypothetical, and this makes that argument invalid. And also, they said soft power is slow, and it's slow to make progress. But the alternative, hard power, is basically countries imposing their military on other countries and using that imposement to bully those countries into submission. And we feel that soft power is a better way to go to that peace, because although maybe the road may be longer, but it leads to more lasting peace and stronger alliances afterwards. And in the second contention, they said that military deterrence is a good way of preventing wars from happening. But in reality, this deterrence just leads to stalemate, and this stalemate leads to tension. Imagine a powder keg, and this stalemate between these two countries and their armies, it just adds to the powder keg. The longer the stalemate goes on, the more gunpowder is put into this powder keg, until eventually the powder keg there's too much gunpowder in that powder keg, gunpowder and conflict, and that powder keg explodes into this giant conflict, a world war. And they also said, and also the threat of nuclear weapons means that if we do end up having a conflict, it'll end in nuclear war, and a worldwide nuclear war would end in catastrophe. This catastrophe would be beyond our imagination. The world would just be completely and utterly destroyed if you go with the con world. And in their cross-ex, they said that many wars came after broken treaties, like resulted from broken treaties. But what they failed to recognize is that many of these treaties that have been broken are a result from war. And so because of this, we can say that war causes more war. But when you have a war, it makes bitterness and hate, and that bitterness and hate grows and grows and grows until that bitterness and hate it just turns into utter hatred for the opposing countries, and that evolves into war and conflict. It just evolves to anarchy, and this is why, Judge, you must affirm the resolution.
Okay, so you said that hard power creates bitterness, which creates hate, which creates conflict, which turns a country into like having a terrorist group. So do you have any example of that being the case?
I just gave you one. Afghanistan. When the U.S. imposed themselves on Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda was formed. And Al-Qaeda created.
And how do you know
terrorism.
that happened only because the U.S. was using hard power?
Because that was Osama bin Laden's literal goal. He said that because if the U.S. doesn't remove their army from Afghanistan, then they'll keep on trying to attack the U.S.
And what was your source for that?
My source is digitalhistory.com.
Okay. Next one is you said that economic sanctions. That I didn't give any examples, so it's not valid.
No, I said that pretending to change to get rid of economic sanctions. You have no examples.
Okay, and I need. Just because something hasn't happened before, does that actually mean that it can never happen?
Yes, but still, pretending to make a change throughout the country is just so out of the norm, and to get every single one of your civilians to go with it, it's just so out of the norm that it's just almost too hypothetical for it to happen.
Are all the citizens of a country the ones who are doing these illegal actions, or is it the actual government itself?
It depends on the type of government that you have. If it's gonna be like a fascist government, then it's obviously the government. But if it's gonna be a democracy that's being like that, then it's obviously gonna be the people.
Okay, and you also said that treaties break because of war.
I didn't say treaties break because of war. I'm saying the treaties that are broken are a result of war.
And how do they directly link to each other? Could you explain to me?
Because Germany, in World War I, Germany, France, Germany.
I'm asking about how they directly relate. To
I know.
any
I'm trying to
instance,
explain to you.
Not one example.
From any instance,
Yeah.
because when a country wins a war, and specifically in France's situation in World War I, the great loss makes bitterness, and that bitterness leads to punishment.
We'll take prep time. Great.
So, fair attack.
That's fine.
Right, you've used 1 minute and 10 seconds so far.
Okay. Everyone ready? My time starts now. In my opponent's attack case, they attacked our first, second, and third contentions. They attacked the first by saying that military action does not always lead to war, which of course is a chance that we shouldn't have to take. If we have the opportunity of using diplomacy rather than war, and obviously diplomacy would be without a catastrophic war resulting in many deaths, then we would probably choose diplomacy because it has a better chance of working. And if it doesn't work the first time, then we can always renegotiate, rather than war, which would cripple an entire society. They also stated that most wars are caused by broken treaties, which, as we stated in the attack case, are results of those wars, and the leftover bitterness from the war causes the treaties to be broken. Thus, I extend that contention. The second contention, they stated that Taiwan, for the foreign aid, they stated that Taiwan gave money to countries and it didn't establish alliances for them. Well, it doesn't work with every example, and just because one example doesn't work, that's an outlier. With the United States, at least, it recovered an entire country from a devastated state, and that is just the result of war. The third contention, they said that broken treaties are because of these long-lasting. It's not long-lasting peace because treaties are often broken. But these broken treaties are caused by war, as we stated before. And they also said that sanctions cripple economies and bring suffering. But those sanctions, as we stated, we never stated that sanctions as our part of it are our case. In fact, we stated foreign aid, which is the opposite, is helping. And we could say that they're gaining money rather than losing it. Also, the sanctions, of course, don't. I urge you to vote pro.
Time.
Okay.
Would you like more?
No. Okay. So, my opponent said that using this hard power can create hate, which creates conflict, and this turns people from these countries into terrorists. But he never proved that there was any direct relationship between the country using hard power on them and their people turning into terrorists. And they didn't give any example of that except the Pakistan one. But again, they had no evidence supporting that. Then they said that having an sanction placed on you and the bad country pretends to change, and they said it's not valid because I didn't give an example, but just because it never happened doesn't mean it couldn't. So you always have to put in a fact you always have to put in what could happen and is likely to happen, because this is actually a logical response that makes sense. Then they said that soft power leads to stronger allies. And based on the question that I asked them, they admitted that soft power is indeed slow and slower than hard power. And with that period of time that it takes soft power additionally to work instead of hard power, hundreds and thousands of people could die. Think about ISIS. ISIS, they're terrorists. They could kill so many people in the midst of that 1 month extra that, let's say, soft power needs to take effect instead of hard power. And they said that deterrence leads to catastrophe, but no, that doesn't happen, because when deterrence happens, the countries are afraid to fight after this, so it can't cause catastrophes. And they also said that treaties break after war, but this just proves that treaties cause war. Because let's say a war happened. I'm not saying it happened because of a treaty specifically, but after, they're saying that treaties break. So
All right, no prep time. All right, my summary speech will start. 3, 2. Now, all right. So in a con world, my opponent's world, they say that there would be. I'm going to compare the two worlds based on whether you vote for con or pro. And in the con world, there would be this powder keg that just builds up gunpowder along with the tension and all the conflict. Like, for example, with deterrence, it creates stalemate, and that stalemate adds tension, and that tension adds to the powder keg. And if you add on the threat of nuclear weapons, we can't use military power, or else it'll end in nuclear war. And that just adds to the tension. And with all these countries with nuclear weapons, the tension just adds on and adds on. And if we don't try to resolve these tensions peacefully and keep on imposing ourselves on other countries, it'll keep adding to the tension until it eventually explodes, and there's an all-out war. And also, they say that we need to use military action to defeat those terrorists, but it's not that simple. We can't just go in there and start shooting up the place and then killing all the terrorists, because when those terrorists die, they become martyrs. They become people who died for something they believed in. And when someone becomes a martyr, they attract in more terrorists. So when you kill 1, 2 more pop up. When you kill those 2, 4 more pop up. When you kill those 4, 8 more pop up. Until more and more terrorists come. And then if we keep on just imposing ourselves like that, the people around the terrorists will start realizing why the terrorists are fighting us, and then they'll join the terrorists, and that'll make them more, and that'll make the terrorist organization bigger and stronger, and it'll only come back at us harder, and it'll just backfire on us. And they also said, but then they also say that hypotheticals may be used in likely situations, but how can a country get its whole population to pretend to change, to remove an economic sanction? It's just so unlikely, and the hypothetical is just so far out there, it's just impossible for it to happen. So therefore, that's just invalid. But the alternative is our world, the pro world. In our pro world, we would have long-lasting peace, and that is why you must affirm the resolution.
We'd like to run our prep time.
Great. You've only used 1:15.
Okay, so I would just like to briefly re-explain our contentions. For number one, diplomacy being slow really does matter, because in, say, the month, like my partner already stated, in a month or two that people can be discussing a situation that is going on, the situation can worsen quite a bit. And our second one, for deterrence, even if there is tension, it's still, people still usually will know that, won't attack if they know that they'll be destroyed if they do. And because of these two basic points that still work and still stand, because these two basic points still stand, I hope you vote for Con.
Great job, everybody.